Hi, guys. Welcome to An ADD Woman podcast. This is episode 20. I cannot believe we are finally here. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the ADHD tax. What is it? How does it happen? And what can we do about it? Welcome to An ADD Woman podcast. I'm your host, Lacy Estelle, writer of all things about ADHD parenting and being an ADHD mother on Mothering the Storm with Lacy Estelle at lacyestelle.com. Here on an ADD Woman podcast, we're going to switch it up and talk about all things to do with ADHD as an adult woman and how we deal with it. Now, you might be thinking, ADHD, women don't really have that. Actually, we do. We've all just been doing such a great job for years of masking it. So let's dive in. So I wanted to start off this episode by telling you how grateful I am that you are listening, that I have gotten to episode 20 of this podcast. I cannot believe it. And I'm kind of shocked that I'm here already, which I slowed down. In the beginning of the year, I was doing 4 episodes a month, and I really do want to get back to that. Life has gotten in the way, and I have rolled back to only doing 2 episodes per month. I want to talk to you guys more. I want to tell you more, but there is just so much going on in my life right now. But I just want to thank you all. I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for writing to me. I get emails from you when, a podcast really seems to strike a nerve for you. I get Instagram messages, and I just cannot tell you how grateful I am that you are listening and hearing what I have to say, because I appreciate every single one of you. I read every single message and every email. So if you ever want to chat, just feel free to shoot me a message. I am an open book, and I would love to talk to you. It's one of my favorite things to do. So the ADHD tax, we're talking TAX, right? I'm not saying any other word. The ADHD tax, it's been going around a lot on social media. I've been seeing a lot of Instagram influencers, TikTokers who talk about ADHD have been talking about the ADHD tax. And what I notice is that nobody seems to be clarifying exactly what it entails. So I kind of came up with my own definition here, and I'm going to call it the ADHD tax refers to the accumulation of unwanted additional expenses that incur because a person has ADHD. So for example, this could be late fees on bills that were forgotten, or overdraft fees from banks when you forgot about subscriptions, and the list goes on. And I'm sure as soon as I said that definition, you're thinking to yourself, oh yeah, okay, that happens to me all the time. So how does it happen? Why does it happen to those of us who have ADHD? And I think it happens because we as ADHDers, we have a huge blind spot. You've heard it said before, we have an out of sight, out of mind mentality, and we don't want to have it because, to be honest, it does. It causes us a lot of grief in our lives between forgetting about people, which sounds terribly sad, but it's true. If we don't see somebody on a regular basis, we don't have a reason to come into contact with them, we will forget to even send them a message or reach out to them. And it makes us seem very inconsiderate. And then it happens also in, financial issues where, like we're talking right now about the ADHD tax, where, if we don't have the bill in front of us, if we don't have to physically go somewhere to take care of that bill, if we don't see it leaving our account every month, we don't remember it, we have to somehow make it physical for us, we can have a reoccurring bill for 6 months or more, 12 months. And it will still surprise us when it comes out every single month. I have tried to tell my husband this. So in our household, we do, all of our expenses, all our budgeting together. And for the last 3 or 4 months now, I think my husband has ADHD, but he functions very, very well, like really well, even if he does have it. But all that to say, for the last 3 or 4 months, he has, I think it's right around the 21st, he has looked at our account and been like, what is this Amazon charge for $15.99? And I'm like, honey, that is our Amazon Prime. We pay for it monthly instead of paying for it yearly. We do? I'm like, yeah, we have this conversation every month. So to say that you can have a reoccurring bill that takes you by surprise, that every month you look at it and you're like, oh, I forgot that was coming out, and still not remember it the following month sounds ridiculous, but I promise you it happens to us. I have times where I will set something down and I will tell myself, don't forget that this is where you put this thing. Like earrings are one of those things, or a necklace. That means a lot to me. My wedding ring, for instance, I might be doing the dishes and I take it off. I set it in the cupboard and I tell myself, okay, don't forget that this is where you put it. If I get busy and I shift my focus on something else, maybe I finish the dishes, I forget to put the ring back on, I move to the bathroom and I start cleaning the bathroom sink. And then I realize, oh, I'm in here. I need to take a shower too. I'm a mess. So I take a shower, I go downstairs and I get ready. All of that transpires in about 45 minutes. And by the time I am downstairs, I am panicked because it's when I look at my hand and I go, where's my wedding ring? And I'm running through my head the last few things I did. And I'm like, did I take it off before I got in the shower? Did I set it on the counter? Did I take it off before I cleaned the bathroom? And I know that if you're listening to this and you don't have ADHD, maybe your spouse is asking you to listen to this episode and you don't have ADHD and you're thinking to yourself, no way. Like, seriously, you forgot you put it in the cupboard? Like, you just put it in the cupboard. But I'm telling you, it happens to us all the time. We lose our keys multiple times a day. It doesn't matter what people tell us to put on them. I used to have a lanyard on mine, and my mother swore that lanyard was the reason why I started remembering where my keys were. It wasn't. That wasn't the case. What it was the lanyard allowed for me to put them into my purse without having to dig in my purse. So I could hang my keys over the side of my purse with the lanyard hanging out. By doing that for so long, it eventually became ingrained. Somehow it did push to my long-term memory. And I just have a habit now of when I come into the house, I immediately put my keys in my purse. Now, I do something else now to where I actually will stick my key fob into a zipper in my purse so that my keys are hanging out and I can visibly see them. I'm totally getting off track, but I'm really trying to drive home the fact that we have an out of sight, out of mind issue. We hate it. We don't like it, but it comes up and it does cost us serious cash. So the other problem is that we don't have much concept of how our habits compound onto each other to create our character traits because we don't see it in real time. So while we dream of a future we know we want to achieve, this all comes back to the sequencing issue that I've talked about in previous episodes. We don't know exactly how to map the steps out to get there. Now, we can if we sit down and we write it all out, and we have to draw it. And if you're not an illustrator, you're thinking to yourself, I don't want to map it out. What I want you to actually visualize here is think back to when you were in fourth grade writing class, okay? Because back then it wasn't called English, it was called writing. You were reading and writing, right? And they tell you, okay, you're going to learn to write a short story. And that short story has to have a beginning, middle, and end. For that to happen, you're going to brainstorm first. And after you brainstorm, you're going to create what they call a writer's map, right? Where you have a center circle that tells you the main topic of your story. And then you have all these other circles coming off. And one of them talks about the characters and the other one talks about where it's going to be set at, what's going to happen in the story, what's the problem, what's going to be solved. So we can do it. We can sequence together the things that we need to get done if we actually sit down and draw them out. But the problem becomes keeping those in the forefront of our mind. It's almost impossible. So to tell an ADHD person, just do a budget. You need a budget. You should write out a budget. Well, imagine that to have a budget and to have an ADHD person actually be able to stick to that budget if this is not something they are skillful in. Now, I have met some ADHD people who budgeting is what they're skilled in. They hyper-focus on it and they are great at it and they have no problems. Unfortunately, for most of us, that's not the case. So say you tell an ADHD person, well, you just need a budget. Great. Okay. But what happens for them in order for this to work for them is that budget has to be something they can keep in their pocket. Now, they could keep it on their phone. Okay. But they will have to reference that budget every single time they go to spend anything. And when they do, they then will have to, in real time, so say they write in the budget that they're going to spend $100 a week in gas. And then for some reason, Saturday rolls around, they get invited to go somewhere and they have to spend an extra $40. If they don't do it immediately, write it into their budget, account for it, they're not going to do it later. They're going to forget. They're going to spend $40. And then later they're going to have to go, how come my budget isn't matching up? I don't understand. What did I do? Because they totally forgot that they spent $40 extra in gas. And then they will go back through their transactions and they will look at it and say, oh, what was that gas for? When did I stop and get gas? Listen, I'm not telling you this to make us all seem like we are harebrained. We are not stupid. What's frustrating to us is because we know we're not stupid. We know we are totally smart enough to stick to a budget. We know we are totally capable of saving money. And our brain seems to be hardwired in a way that it constantly wants to push us up against all the habits we want to change. So referencing a budget before every Starbucks latte, before every time you pull up to a gas pump, before every granola bar you buy in the break room. I mean, does that sound fun to anyone? Do you want to have to pull your phone out or your pocket tablet, out every 5 minutes, what it feels like, so that you can stay on budget, so you can stay on task? I mean, maybe to some of you listening, that sounds really fun, but to most ADHD people I meet, that sounds awful and they're never going to do it. So how do we remedy this? A lot of us do things like we set reminders on our phones. Sometimes if we're in stable and trusting relationships and the other person we're with does really well with budgeting and we don't, we will outsource and we'll say, okay, honey, you do the budget. You make sure the bills are paid. You do the planning for all of those things. We'll write things down. We'll keep a notebook maybe and we'll try to keep budget. But ultimately, none of those things they don't push the habits into our long-term memory. And I'll tell you why. Because for ADHD people to tap into that long-term ingrained memory, something has to do one of two things. It either has to become something we can do on autopilot, and a budget is never something you can do really on autopilot because you have to be consciously engaged. The only other way to do it is to tap into another sense. And by that, I say you have to get yourself to recognize either a unhappy or not necessarily unhappy, but an unpleasant experience with not having money. And it has to be detrimental enough to cause you to take action, or you have to have some sort of experience that is euphoric with cause of having money to spend or having a savings. And you have to amplify that feeling strong enough to help engage you into taking action. And that sounds like, how in the world do we do that? And one of the easiest, most simple ways to do that is to pay cash for everything. And I'm sure the next thing you're going to say is like, okay, Lacy, who are you, Dave Ramsey? I'm not Dave Ramsey. And I'm even though I think Dave has some really good points on certain things, I'm not necessarily an avid Dave Ramsey person because of the fact that I'm just not all about interest rates being a terrible, awful thing. And I don't always think that debt is a terrible, awful thing. I don't. But I'm not going to get off on a tangent here. Why I say to spend cash. There have been studies done that show that the physical act of giving cash away registers as pain in our brain. Now, I would imagine when you have ADHD and you're an impulsive spender, that amount of pain feels a lot less. It's a lot diminished or a lot more diminished. And I would imagine that's because we're risk takers. We don't have that sequencing aspect of, oh my gosh, this is my last $20. Sometimes it will happen, but it doesn't feel threatening enough. But what does happen is if you are forced to spend cash, when you run out, you're out. You don't have any more. You can't keep running your card and overdrafting your account. Now, how do you make it so that you are forced to spend cash? You have to go to your bank and you have to specifically tell them you do not want them to cover your overdrafts. If a transaction comes in and you cannot afford it, you want for them to deny the transaction. Now, prepare your pride for that, because that means that until you get your crap together, you might be at the grocery checkout line and assume you have money and go to swipe your card and it gets denied. As much as that sucks, you will then have to say, okay, hang on one second. You have to step to the side, check your bank account, see what is actually in there. And sometimes that means you may be walking out of there with no groceries because you didn't plan. But that scenario will stick in your mind because you don't want to feel that embarrassment. You don't want to feel that helpless feeling ever again. And you will go home and you will say, okay, what do I have to do so that that doesn't happen to me, or that happens to me a lot less? So that is how you can help yourself with ADHD tax. But I want to also get into what are some other things that actually cause an ADHD tax. So when I talked about the fact that we as ADHDers, we don't see the compound effects of the habits. Now, what do I mean by that? I've read a book, and I think I've referenced it in a few other podcasts, called Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's excellent. I highly recommend that book. What I will say, though, is for an ADHD person, he talks about in that book how when people need to change habits, one of the most powerful things they can do is create a visual representation. And I would say if you have ADHD, the only way you can change your habits is going to be to create some sort of visual representation for you every day. That's a reminder of all the things that you need to do. Now, if you have goals in mind and you're thinking to yourself, okay, I want to lose weight. Let's just do an easy habit that most people at some point in their life have related to. You want to change your weight. Let's say whether it's you want to go down, maybe you want to gain weight. I don't know. Maybe you want to gain muscle. You have to write down what it is, what's it going to take for you to get to that point. Now, when you say, okay, say I want to do it in a year. Okay, over the course of the year, what sort of habits are you going to have to cultivate for that to happen? That's going to require that you go to the gym on a regular basis, that you do at least 30 minutes of cardio 3 times a week, that you watch what you eat, that you do all those things. Well, maybe you look at that list and you say to yourself, how do I watch what I eat? I don't even know what to eat. I don't even know what nutritional food looks like. So then you have to work even further backwards, and you have to say, okay, well, now to start, to even get to do this, I have to read a book. And to read that book and learn about nutrition and learn about what I want to eat or what will fuel my body for my goals, I have to go back and I have to read a book. Well, now you have, as an ADHD person, you may be thinking to yourself, oh, that just sounds like so much work and I'll just figure it out. It's like our constant excuse we give ourselves with ADHD. We say we'll figure it out, but what we're really saying is we don't want to figure it out. Okay, we're saying we don't want to do the hard work of actually figuring out what it will take. We just want it to happen. And it's not what happens for neurotypical people. Unfortunately, they have a brain that allows for them to go, oh, I'm just going to pick up this book on nutrition because I bet you that'll help me with that whole goal that I want to reach of, losing 5 pounds or losing 10 pounds or whatever, fitting into a size 2 again. They naturally move towards their goals with less roadblocks than we do because they have less trouble seeing the compound effects of the sequences in their day-to-day actions. So ADHD tax, okay, it also comes out when your compound habits aren't compounding in the way that is beneficial for you. So there was an Instagram reel I watched recently. I think his Instagram name might be like Dr. Kojo. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, or maybe that's just all I call him because I think it's actually like his really long last name. He's a great guy. He talks a lot about ADHD, and he did a post that said he's wearing Invisalign for the 3rd time. He either said the 3rd or 4th time. I don't remember exactly, but he said the ADHD tax is real. He would forget to wear his retainer a lot. And then his teeth would move back and he would be forced to have to redo Invisalign altogether. But when that happens for you, when you have ADHD and you go to your dentist and they say, your teeth are moving again, you may want to consider getting Invisalign or doing this or whatever. It's going to take a few times before you start to go, oh, man, maybe this is all because I didn't wear my retainer as often as I should have. Because I'll be honest with you, in the moments, you don't notice. It's an out of sight, out of mind. How do you think that people gain weight? You don't gain weight because somebody wakes up one day and says, I'm just going to eat, 2,600 calories for my 1,800 calorie per day rule for the rest of the year and hope for the best. Nobody sets out to do that. What happens is you have habits, and if you aren't consciously aware of those habits, they get you. And you have a habit of always needing to snack in front of the TV. You want to watch TV? You got to make popcorn. Well, then one day you don't have popcorn. Well, you have a popsicle. Oh, well, then one day you don't have a regular popsicle. Oh, you have fudgesicles. Oh, that sounds great. Well, now all of a sudden you're having an ice cream sandwich every time you sit down to watch TV. And at the end of the year, you've gained 13 pounds and you're looking back and going, how did this happen? And I'm not saying that it's just the ice cream sandwich's fault. And I'm not saying I haven't been there, because I have. But I'm telling you, the only way as an ADHD person to remedy yourself of dealing with the ADHD tax or any sort of issue that comes from the fact that we as ADHD people struggle to see the compound effects of our habits is to take those habits from subconscious to conscious. You have to move them from being something that you just naturally do to giving yourself forethought. Now, here's the problem. All of those chemicals that we need to have that forethought, to have that pause, we lack them. So there's a few ways you can do it if you don't have medication. So I currently can't take medication right now. I'm going to be in between medications, and I'll explain that probably in a different episode. But one of the things that I have been making myself do is meditation. Now, I am a Christian, and I know I talk about that a lot in this podcast, so that shouldn't be news to you. But there are Christian meditation apps that will walk you through listening to God's word and taking breath. Now, that sounds so new agey, and I'm so far from like the epitome of a hippie that you would be surprised, and I'm not trying to stereotype anybody. Please don't take it that way. But I'm just saying that, I've never been the type of person that wants to do yoga or anything along those lines. But meditation is the only key for me, is having to practice and force my brain to allow for me to remain in control. I have to keep the reins. Now, for me, I think that also comes back to my faith. I'm a Christian. I can't forget that as a Christian, I have within me the Holy Spirit. And Galatians talks about how the fruits of the Spirit include kindness, love, tenderness, gentleness, self-discipline. Self-discipline. I mean, how could I, as a Christian, how could I walk through my life, day-to-day life? Now, yes, I have ADHD. God made me this way. He put the type of brain that I have in my mind for a reason. And I can't ever imagine that reason being anything other than to glorify himself. Well, how does he glorify himself? When I lean on him in my weaknesses, he will strengthen me, and I can hold fast to that faith. So how do I take a habit? How do I take a habit that is hurting my financial bottom line or hurting my waistline or hurting my future? How do I take any of those things and I actually can take them from being a subconscious thing that I just do to being a conscious thing that I'm aware of and I try to correct? I lean on God, I meditate, and I focus as much as I can. But I have to practice focusing because I have ADHD. It's not something that comes natural to me. I have to practice being able to focus, and meditation allows for me to do that. Now, if you are able to take medication, what you may notice is that at a certain point in time, what you thought medication would do for you is not actually what it does. It does not remedy your ADHD. It does not get rid of it. And the therapeutic dose of your medication should not even make you do stuff. It's not even a matter of all of a sudden you have motivation. What I like to say is it's like a jump start. Or for me, I feel like it's actually more like a pause. Being able to take the right kind of medication gives me forethought. It gives me a moment before I reach for chips or cookies or anything along those lines to say, is this really what I want to do right now? Or it gives me the moment to say, oh, you know what? I need to get the dishes done. So I'm just going to get up and do them. Rather than sitting here on the couch and having to mull over in my head how long I think it's going to take me to do the dishes, If I really have to do them today, can I get by on not doing them right now? If I don't do them, will my husband say something? All of the things that happen inside our brain when you have ADHD while you're just trying to ask yourself the right question that will make you get up. Taking medication allows for you to have more control of the thoughts and where you want to direct them to. I like to say that Jesus and leaning on the Holy Spirit is the bit that you put in a horse's mouth to steer it the direction you want to go. And God is more than capable of doing all the things that you need him to do in your brain without medication. But that doesn't always mean that's how he will enable you. Sometimes he will say, I need for you to bite your pride and go get medication because that's what I want you to do. And for me, that's what it has been for the last few years. And now that I'm in between medications, it's a great opportunity for me to stretch my faith. Stretch my faith, recognize that God does not need medication to help me have a handle on my brain. What he does need for me to do, though, is run to him as fast as I can and cling to him as tightly as I can. And trust that he will not steer me wrong. So that is a whole bunch of extra stuff about the ADHD tax. I'm curious as to how you felt about this episode. If you feel like ADHD tax is kind of a silly name for being just, forgetful. Yeah, sure. But you can't deny the fact that it definitely does cost us money. As an ADHDer, I kind of hate how much extra money I've spent over the course of my lifetime on late fees, forgetfulness, gas to burn to turn around and drive back home because I forgot about something, forgetting to get the oil changed in my car until my car is broken down. All those kinds of things that happen because you have ADHD, they cost you money, they cost you time, they cost you patience. Let's lean on God to help us get this under control. And let's remind ourselves that God did not give us our brain to burden us, because he didn't. He gave us our brain because he loves the way that it makes us us. And he loves that all of those gaps that we struggle with, he will help us fill. Amen to that. I will talk to you guys really soon. Have an awesome week. I hope it's great. Don't let back to school stress you out too much. If it starts to, just shoot me a message and let's talk about it. Have a great day.